Spiritual bypassing, using the light to hide from the dark. I want to talk about something that is happening inside the awakening community right now. Something that's been kind of dressed up as enlightenment, packaged as peace, sold as the highest expression of spiritual evolution. And it is none of those things. It is escape, dressed in white linen, burning incense, speaking in the language of love and light. It is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-betrayal a spiritually aware person can engage in, and it's everywhere. It has a name: spiritual bypassing. So the term was first named by psychologist John Wellwood in 1984, but the phenomenon is as old as spirituality itself. Spiritual bypassing is the use of spiritual beliefs, practices, and language to avoid dealing with the unresolved psychological wounds, unprocessed emotions, and the genuine, often brutal work of inner transformation. In other words, using the light to hide from the dark. And here is what makes it so insidious. It looks exactly like growth from the outside. It sounds like wisdom. It uses all the right vocabulary. It performs all the right practices. But underneath the meditation cushion, underneath the gratitude journal, underneath the carefully curated frequency, there is an unprocessed pain, unacknowledged anger, grief that has never been allowed to move, trauma that has been spiritually reframed rather than genuinely healed. And here's the truth that no comfortable spiritual teaching will tell you. Unprocessed pain does not disappear when you put a spiritual frame around it. It goes underground, and from underground, it runs everything. So what does that look like? So let's get specific, because spiritual bypassing is so normalized in conscious communities that most people engaging in it have absolutely no idea that they're even doing it. It looks like responding to genuine injustice, your own or your others, with everything happens for a reason, before the wound has even been acknowledged, using cosmic perspective as a way to skip the very human, very necessary experience of feeling what actually happened. It looks like labeling anger as low vibration and suppressing it in the name of staying positive, when that anger is actually your soul's appropriate and intelligent response to something that violated your boundaries, your truth, and your dignity. It looks like premature forgiveness. And I want to be careful here, because forgiveness is generally one of the most liberating things a soul can do. But forgiveness that arrives before the pain has been felt fully, before the pain has been fully felt or fully acknowledged and fully honored, is not forgiveness. It's avoidance wearing forgiveness as a costume. It looks like using detachment as a defense. The spiritual teaching of non-attachment is profound and ancient and true. But there is a version of it being practiced right now that is simply emotional unavailability dressed up in Vedic language. It looks like the relentless performance of peace. The person who is always calm, always centered, always above it all, who has actually used spiritual practice to build a more sophisticated wall around their pain rather than genuinely move through it. It looks like dismissing therapy, shadow work, or emotional processing as unnecessary because I've already done the spiritual work. As if sitting in meditation exempts you from the deeply human work of integrating your wounds. And it looks like spiritual communities where everyone agrees, everyone vibrates high, everyone affirms each other's light, and no one ever speaks an uncomfortable truth, where genuine discernment is labeled as negativity and real talk is dismissed as unevolved. That is not a spiritual community. That is a very well-intentioned echo chamber. So why do we do it? Why does this happen? Why do genuinely seeking, genuinely intelligent, genuinely awakening souls fall into this pattern? Because the pain's real. And spirituality offers something that feels like relief. So when you discover meditation, when you encounter the teaching that you are not your thoughts, when you begin to understand that there is a dimension of your being that exists beyond suffering It is genuinely liberating. For the first time, you can step back from the chaos of your inner world and breathe. But there is a crucial fork in the road at this point, and most people, understandably, take the easier path. The harder path says, use this expanded perspective as a foundation from which to go back into the wound, to face it with more courage than you had before, to process, integrate, and genuinely heal what is unresolved, not from a place of being consumed by it, but from a place of being grounded enough to finally look at it directly. The easier path says, stay up here in the light, in the peace, where it doesn't hurt, where you can speak the language of love and transcendence and never have to go back into the darkness and do the actual work. And in the spiritual world, particularly the commodified social media version of it, makes the easier path not just available, but celebrated, which is how genuine seekers end up spiritually sophisticated and emotionally undeveloped at the same time, fluent in the language of the soul and completely estranged from their own human experience. So there are consequences to that. So here is what spiritual bypassing actually costs you. It costs you authenticity, because a self that has been spiritually reframed rather than genuinely met is still a performed self, still a mask, just a more evolved looking mask. The real you, the one with the wounds and the rage and the grief and the confused, complicated, beautiful humanity, cannot be fully present when the spiritual ego is managing that image. It costs you genuine connection. You cannot truly connect with another soul while performing transcendence. Real intimacy requires real vulnerability. Real vulnerability requires real contact with your own unprocessed experience. Bypass the experience, and you bypass the connection. It costs you actual healing. The wound does not care how many meditations you've done. It does not care how high your vibration is. It does not respond to reframing. It responds to being seen and being felt, being moved through. Any spiritual practice that takes you away from that process rather than into it, however beautiful, however ancient, is not healing you. It is managing you. And it costs you something I've spoken about on this channel from the very beginning. It costs you the truth. Because a soul that is using spiritual practice to avoid its very own reality cannot access genuine truth, cannot develop genuine discernment, cannot receive genuine intuitive guidance, because genuine guidance from the soul almost always points directly at what the bypass is designed to avoid. The light you are using to transcend your darkness is the same light you need to illuminate it. So what does that look like? So what's the alternative? What does real spiritual work, the kind that actually transforms rather than transcends, actually look like? It looks like being willing to feel everything, not wallow in it, not be consumed by it, but genuinely, courageously feel it. Anger, grief, fear, shame, the full spectrum of the human emotional experience. Because every one of those emotions, when genuinely met rather than spiritually managed, contains intelligence, contains information, contains the very material your soul needs to complete its healing and step into its full power. It looks like shadow work, going into the parts of yourself that the spiritual performance has been hiding. The jealousy, the resentment, the unmet needs, the parts of the parts you've labeled as unspiritual and locked in a basement. Carl Jung said it with perfect precision. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It looks like being honest in your spiritual community, saying the uncomfortable thing, naming the dynamic that everyone is performing around, choosing real over comfortable, even in the spaces that were supposed to be safe. And it looks like integrating your spiritual understanding with your human experience, not using one to escape the other. The goal was never to transcend your humanity. The goal is to bring your full soul into your humanity, embodied, present, whole. The greatest mystics were not people who escaped their humanness. They were people who went so completely, so courageously into it that they found the divine waiting on the other side. Interesting. So here's what I want you guys to sit with. Genuine awakening is not comfortable, never will be. It was never supposed to be. Every tradition that has ever understood real transformation, from the shamanic death and rebirth to the mystic's dark night of the soul, to the alchemist's process of dissolution before gold, every single one of them understood that the path goes through the darkness, not around it. The light is real. The peace is real. The transcendence is real. But it's earned by going into the places that terrify you the most, by feeling what you've been spiritually managing, by choosing truth over the beautiful, comfortable, incense scented story of who you wish you were. That's the work. Not the version that looks good on Instagram, not the version that gets you liked in the spiritual community, not the version that lets you float above your humanity and call it evolution. The real version, the one that costs you something. Because a soul that has genuinely been through the fire, sat in the fire, that has faced its own darkness and come out on the other side, doesn't just speak about the light, it becomes the light. Stay conscious, stay sovereign, and keep creating. I love you all.